So welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all, and welcome to those of you who are in the audience. This year, as part of our ongoing exploration of the mission of our center, the Obermann Center for Advanced Studies at the University of Iowa, we've held a series of amazing conversations with scholars in different disciplines about what is research now. This is the last of those conversations. They've all been recorded as this one is being, and they've been posted. And if you go to the Obermann Center YouTube channel, you can find the group of them, and they've just been fascinating. And we're going to figure some ways to get more of that information out in the public. The focus of this group, and I'm so grateful to all these folks for being here, is to think about, we all talk about interdisciplinarity. And Dave Cwiertny and I are both really fascinated by what I call radical interdisciplinarity. So not just history and literature, but engineering and English kind of collaborations. And so the two teams who are represented here today are groups that are located in the sciences heavily, but and social sciences, but are groups that have gone through processes to form their teams that are unusually deep and thoughtful. And along the way, I've been so impressed that both teams have had great conversations with members of them about the fact that they've realized that technological solutions to problems are inert until they're activated by attention to local communities, local cultures, and cultural transformation, which is one of the best arguments I've ever heard from multidisciplinary teams. So I'm very grateful to both groups for being represented here. What I'm going to do is introduce each in a sentence and then ask them to tell you more about themselves as they also introduce their projects. So we have a real case studies to work with, and then we'll launch into conversation. And if you have questions, feel free to post in chat, and I will do my best to make sure we weave those into the conversation. I'm going to go around my screen. David Cwiertny is Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering, Director of the Center for Health Effects of Environmental Contamination, and Director of the Environmental Policy Research Program in the Public Policy Center here at the University of Iowa. He's also running a wonderful experimental graduate program that I hope we'll hear a little bit about today. Brian Ekdale is an Associate Professor and Director of the Graduate Program in the School of Journalism and Mass Communications here at Iowa. Raven Morrall-Lloyd is Assistant Professor of African and African American Studies and Film and Media Studies at Washington University in St. Louis, and we are so proud she's one of our alumni also. Rishabh Nithyanand is Assistant Professor in the Department of Computer Science here at the University of Iowa, and Maya Trotz is Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of South Florida. So I wondered, to get us started, Maya and Dave, if you all would sort of set the stage by talking about the research project you're working on together and the key research issues that you're tackling or have arisen in the project, and then we'll turn to the other team. Maya, you want to start us off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having us here. We're working on the Blue-Green Action Platform, Blue Gap, to connect people across watersheds to address economic and health challenges caused by nitrogen pollution. Sources of that, are farming, septic tanks, car exhaust, the fertilizer you apply to your lawns, depending on where you live. We are a team of scientists, engineers, and community organizers, and we hope that this platform empowers people to reach well-informed decisions for better living through storytelling, reliable water quality information, and tailored decision trees that link to next steps for action. We're part of a Blue Economy Accelerator program funded by the National Science Foundation. It's phase 1, started in October 2021, ends this August, and we're currently putting in a phase 2 proposal in a month. For phase 1, we focused on team science, human-centered design, and storytelling as part of the accelerator. And our central problem, of course, that we're tackling is nitrogen pollution. Some of the questions are, what are the stories that do people have, including frontline communities, to share about how nitrogen pollution affects them and things that they're doing to address it? How do we effectively tell those stories and share them through an open online platform? And what impact do those stories have on really engaging others with the platform? How do nitrogen champions influence nitrogen management decision-making? And what are the best leverage points for champions to influence nitrogen management decision-making? And we're coming up with more questions, but I think those are okay for the start.
Thank you. Dave, anything you want to add? I love the idea of an engineer working in storytelling.
Yeah, well, first, happy Earth Day, everyone, right? I think it's maybe fitting that we're talking about nitrogen pollution on Earth Day. What I'll add is that, what makes this, we talk a lot about interdisciplinarity and grand challenges. And so I think nutrient pollution is really a global scale problem, but here in the US, it's continental scale. And it really is, it's a recognized societal grand challenge. And it's, to me, to be involved on a team that Maya has been really working to bring together is you need diverse disciplines and thought to tackle this, right? And then it needs to be sort of human-centered. And so the community focus of what we're doing has been the most rewarding part. It's these frontline communities that are experiencing these challenges first and really making sure we figure out how to amplify those voices, because it's not going to be a technical fix. I say more and more all the time as an engineer, like it's rarely ever technology or engineering or design is the barrier. It's these other pieces that really have to think about the social, the political, the economic. And then when you bring in the justice issues as well, and this is a huge justice issue, and Maya has been a champion on this for some time, which is why it's so great to work with her, it takes on another layer of why you really need to make sure you're putting people first. And so I can't think of any other way to do this type of work than on a diverse team. So I'll probably stop there and then let the other projects talk about their stuff.
That's great, and a great transition to the other team. Brian, do you want to start your group off?
Sure, yeah. So our group is called the Algorithms and Culture Research Group, and it started 5 or 6 years ago by Tim Havens, who is a faculty member in communication studies. He's doing a fellowship in Hungary this year. And he really just wanted to bring together people around the university who are studying algorithms from different perspectives. And that eventually kind of worked its way into a research group, but was like, hey, let's try to figure out how to do a study together. And we have a mix of humanities scholars. So in communication, we have humanities and social scientists within the discipline of communication. And then we have computer scientists as well. And, we've been doing a lot of work of trying to figure out how we can take advantage of the different ways that our disciplines see problems and think about solutions, and then different kind of methodological and theoretical things that we can bring together. And so that's kind of our group. And I can hand it off to Raven and Rashab to say, actually, Teresa, that's your job, is to handle. So I'll back up.
I need all the help I can get. I'm perfectly happy with that. Rashab, if you would jump in, and I want to apologize for not asking you in advance how to pronounce your name correctly. If you would pronounce it for us, I will do better.
Absolutely. No problem at all. You actually did a pretty good job. It's Rishab Nityanand.
Thank you.
That's the full name. Yeah, so the projects that we're working on from a computer science perspective are trying to figure out exactly what the algorithms that we interact with every day are actually doing. How are they making their decisions? And the great part about the collaboration with the social sciences and the humanities is we get to study the impact that these algorithms have on real people, right? So whether it's a YouTube recommendation system or Facebook's news feed, the computer science part of it can try and tell you what decisions are being made by the algorithm to put certain types of content in front of you. But it's the humanities scholars and the social scientists who help us figure out what that actually does to people. And that's I think, the real value of this interdisciplinary group.
Raven, as one of those humanities scholars, how do you fit in?
Yeah, I love that Rashab said the impact of algorithms on real people. So the real people part is what I see as my role as a humanist. in terms of mitigating the harm to different users, and marginalized users in particular. So when we are designing studies, I see it as my role, and it's really all of our roles, but based on my background, I'm able to provide input to make sure we're not perpetuating the same stereotypes and harms against, for example, Black folks or any other marginalized group based on class, race, gender, etc. So I think we make a pretty good team or pair,
Well, and I know from working a little bit with your team that process of formation. I was sent y'all earlier a question in which I was being lyrical about George Eliot's romance of vocation and how putting a team together is like a certain kind of courtship. And I'm wondering, what have been the ups and downs of your two teams' courtships as you did try to bring these people from very different intellectual positions together, and especially given both of your teams trying to find a meaningful, serious role for your community interlocutors. Anybody want to start us off with that question?
I mean, I can give it a go. I know Maya's got some thoughts on it too. So our team's fairly large. I think I was looking like we have like 18 folks, and so I think you run into all the normal sort of things you got to work through: common language, shared vision, and really working to get to that. It's funny. I feel like we're really just clicking now. I don't know how Maya feels about it, but like we started this in October of last year. And we're part of this NSF program that's very deliberate in team formation and giving us some skills and tools to work through that. But it has still been, it just takes time. And so one of the more disadvantages of this NSF program is that accelerator piece that Maya was mentioning is they want it to be intentionally fast to translate the research into action. And that's great, but man, like doing it well takes time and takes a lot of trust. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm directly getting into what you're getting at, but I would say that what's worked is we've really made sure we've taken the time to get to know one another and to figure out where our common interests and language and vision are. And I feel like we've developed a deep amount of trust and respect through the process, and I think that keeps growing, right? I think the hard part for us has been when you do bring in outside. We're trying to put communities and their voices first. What we hear from them and listening to them constantly throws us for a bit of a loop, because I think as researchers and scholars, we always have sort of our preformed ideas or hypotheses as to what we think our role is, and it could be completely upended. And there's a little bit of vulnerability in that, because what if my expertise isn't the one that's needed? But I think we've worked through that pretty well because we've communicated. We meet a lot, but I think that's necessary. So that's sort of my take on some of that. Maya, I don't know if you have thoughts to elaborate on in response.
I would just add that NSF introduced us to this group called the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative and this collaboration agreement that they have. And that was the first time I saw it, and I think for many in the group to see it. And we met in person in the very beginning for our workshop in Tampa, and actually had a one-on-one with the facilitators from the Toolbox Dialogue Initiative. The focus there was on sort of perceptions and biases and this idea of creating an inclusive environment. And that really, I think, set the tone for us to recognize the diversity in our team. And to sort of really commit to this idea of mutual respect. And everyone sort of provided input to what that collaboration agreement should look like. I definitely encourage others to look at it, as I think it is a neat tool.
Interesting.
I can jump in for our group. Yeah, I mean, I think it's challenging to understand how someone else sees the world from a completely different epistemological standpoint or methodological approach. And so have been some challenges from kind of the work perspective. I think what has worked best is the community we have. Like David, our team is much bigger. We've got about 10 people and we meet every week for at least an hour. In fact, after this call, we're immediately jumping to our research group meeting from there. And, I think what in the first few years that we were together, where we were figuring things out and couldn't quite figure out exactly what it meant to work together, we weren't really productive in the traditional sense. I mean, it took us a long time before we had anything that counted as a publication, but these are some of my favorite people. And so what kept me kind of continued to be invested in the group and is really the relationships we've developed. It's one of my funnest meetings. Well, it's probably the funnest meeting I have. Meetings aren't inherently fun, but this is something I look forward to on a weekly basis. And especially during COVID, which is a really tough time and isolating time, this was one of the ways that I felt connected to a larger community.
And oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, either of you want to comment?
Sure. Yeah, I cannot highlight how important it is that everyone in the group is actually really, really nice. It's good people, right? And that helps so much when you're getting through a little bit of frustration that comes up, which is normal in cross-disciplinary collaborations, because just to put into perspective, I have had zero social science or humanities formal education, right, from undergrad to now. And I don't know how many people have had a computer science background, but when you put groups like this together, we're starting from fundamentally different points. We come from different cultures, from different countries even, right? And the amount of patience that is required to make a collaboration work is incredible. And I'm so thankful that everyone in our group is actually just an incredibly patient, nice person, and that helps a lot.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is I think we have worked out a really good balance between being productive and that sense of community, or just being good people and who care about each other. So if somebody has something going on, which inevitably for a group this large who have worked together, I don't know, 7 years or something, things are going to come up, right? And so I think we have patience and respect for each other to step away from a project when something's needed, right? But also the respect for productivity. Like, what does a journal mean in computer science, a high tier journal, as opposed to in communication studies or journalism? So that balance has taken a while to work through, but it's been important.
And you mentioned this, Brian, the fact that you even had to develop shared vocabularies, so that your research groups are their own cultures, as well as thinking about where the technology that you're looking at requires attention to the cultures in which you're working external to your group. I'm curious about how you found deliberate ways to talk about that. So my experience of watching groups who want to work together is often a group of people will come together and they just think they should launch into the project. And so they move forward, and then they hit the wall when they realize they're using the same language to talk about different things, or they have really different objectives that haven't been talked through. So in both of your cases, how did you uncover those cultural differences? I mean, it sounds like you were unusually deliberative about not waiting until you hit a wall with the group to start realizing you needed to think about creating a collaborative culture. And so, I mean, thinking for other people about their own process, what's worked? What's been helpful?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe you might be giving us more credit than we deserve. I mean, Raven was there for our first study that we tried to do, and it was much more CS focused, and we were offering some of the perspective. And the first version of the paper was like, oh, I'll write the discussion section. And the reviews we got back was, this discussion section is gobbledygook, because it was, I'm writing from a completely different discipline of kind of the type of work that what was expected at this computer science conference. And I think, we had some fits and starts. We had various ideas and we kind of dipped our toes. And I mean, really, I think, give Rashab a lot of credit. When he came in, he's like, let's figure out a big project we want to do and let's search out for a grant to get it. And we're very fortunate to get that grant. That helped give us a lot of focus. But I think the lessons of those, some of those bumps early on helped teach us that we need to kind of make sure we're at a pace where everyone understands. Like, one of the things we're spending a lot of time on right now is we did a pretty large scale survey, and we have two members, Andy and Ashley, who are really our survey experts. And when they're presenting what they're finding from the analysis, they have to put up with people like me that say, wait, explain to me again what a mediating variable is, right? Like they have to, and they're very good in patience saying, okay, well, this is what that is. Or, when we've been working on another paper and Andy might say, wait, what do you mean by a Foucauldian analysis? And, Raven and I can slow down and have the conversation as well. And so I think that it has, it takes a while to understand each other, but I think fundamentally it's respect from everyone else's area of expertise and understanding that when people are asking questions, it's not because they're challenging the way someone does something, it's because they really want to understand.
I could add for our project, I think both David and I have, we both lead national research traineeship programs that are focused on interdisciplinary training for graduate students at the food, energy, water nexus. And as environmental engineers, we partner with colleagues from other disciplines outside of engineering, like anthropology and policy. And David could speak to his experience, but I've learned through those and other previous grants, the importance of developing that common taxonomy. And we did that during our first workshop. We sort of had terms that were in our proposal that we thought it was important to work through. Terms like blue economy, green economy, that in the literature are also quite diverse definitions. We still need to loop back in again to where we are right now to come back to those terms. Most recently, I'm thinking about one of our meetings this week where the term like community, which is something that we're using, community champions came up. And working with anthropologists, terms like that, we really have to question how we use it and be more deliberate in what we mean by it. And so it really is interesting because the accelerator, as David said, is fast-paced. And that sometimes does not go with sort of the way in which our disciplines do this research. But we are finding common ground. And if we have to hash it out either online in Slack or, in a shared document, that's something that we're committed to doing. As we do workshops with community members, our definitions will evolve. As more and more people come into this space, our definitions will evolve. And I think we are agile enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, I think, and I feel we're very lucky that NSF's program that's funding us is essentially giving us some help with this, right? I mean, it's expected that we're supposed to do some team building in this first year. And there's some messages they've hammered into us pretty clearly about sort of make everything explicit, talk about it and ask those questions and the dangers of assumptions. Like they've given us some fairly trivial things that might make common sense, but when you bring it to a dynamic team, it's absolutely critical. And so, yeah, I think we've actually had the opportunity through that facilitation that Maya mentioned to sit there and answer questions on we all answered the same question on a scale about different values and how we interpret things. And then you talk through those differences. And I think it's revealed, particularly when it comes to, the role that communities play, making sure that we are all coming at our relationships, interactions with them, with the similar understanding of where our thresholds are for, how we're going to engage, what things we won't compromise on. That's absolutely critical. Because otherwise, you get push and pull in a dynamic that doesn't lead to necessarily really, a productive project.
I'm really curious about how your peers inside the university view the work that you're doing. I mean, I'm prepared to believe all science is now these wonderful communities of thoughtful people who are working their way carefully towards team building. But I can imagine the pressure of grants is in tension very often with that utopian vision. How do your colleagues understand what you do? Do they work similarly? Dave is smiling.
I'd actually really like to, I don't want to put Maya on the spot, but I'd love to hear it. Because for me, I mean, Teresa, we've been trying to push interdisciplinary efforts on this campus at Iowa for some time. And it's very, I think one of the things that excites me about environmental engineering is there is a movement afoot. And I think Maya has been a leader in this with her students, that we need this sort of engaged work. We need this community-centric work. We need to be getting engineers that have a better understanding of justice, and environmental racism. That we can't do our jobs as engineers well without hearing from these outside voices and these outside disciplines. So I think it's changing for us as a discipline. Maya, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's still plenty of pushback because we're also a pretty strict discipline is sort of where we've come from historically. So I don't know. I think it's an interesting space for engineers to work in that's absolutely needed, but I also think it can be very poorly received because it's very non-traditional. And well, if you do that, you're just watering down what our discipline should be known for.
I would say at USF, when I got here in 2004, in 2006, I think we became a community engaged university. And then in 2000 and around 9-10, we had a dean of the graduate school who was hired, came from NSF, had started some of the sustainable manufacturing programs there, and had gotten a $13 million grant to sort of build interdisciplinarity and sustainability initiatives at USF. And $500,000 seed grants, had to be more than one discipline, had to create new curriculum, and interdisciplinary research. And a few of the colleagues in my department, who would have been assistant professors at the time, received those grants. And so I think it's just been something that I've been doing since I came to USF, and I'm lucky to have mentors who are hired to come in and mentor us, like Jim Mihalsik, who also are doing sort of this interdisciplinary and community engaged work through a Peace Corps program that he was leading at Michigan Tech. I would say that it's an interesting time right now in the US in terms of where funding is with the infrastructure bill and with the Justice 40 initiatives. So I would bet that many of our colleagues who may not have looked at these issues before are looking at it now, because faculty follow the money. And if you have RFPs coming out that are $1 million, $2 million, that are significant, we are going to join teams where we learn these skill sets and start to engage in this work. It's just how I think it's the nature of our work. We are agile also in the words we use in our proposal for the work that we wish to do. And so I think because we bring in funding with these projects, there is some acknowledgement that the work is important. And in my department, I do feel we have a grant under review to really look at some of the sort of like how things like anti-Black racism really could, how to make our environmental engineering curriculum more inclusive through this lens of the impact of anti-Black racism on our infrastructure. And that requires, support from other faculty members who may not have worked in this space or in communities, but definitely interested in learning more and sort of having students engage in this kind of work.
And Maya, would you say a little more about what is the, did you say Justice 40? What is that program?
Gosh, I just went to the Deep South Center for Environmental Justice and the Bullard Center for Environmental and Climate Justice, Historically Black Colleges and University Climate Justice Symposium. And on the first night, Dr. Bullard gave a presentation and quizzed us on this. And I did get it right then, but I may get it wrong now. But it's this commitment to a percent, making sure that our investments benefit communities that have been disadvantaged when it comes to resources for things like infrastructure in the past. And it's a requirement for federal agencies to really develop methods to deliver on this initiative. So one might think there's renewable energy investment coming. 40% of that funding needs to show that it benefits environmental justice communities. A main issue that was also, raised at that conference was sort of like, well, if that money is coming, majority of it is going to go to companies and people who are not from those communities. And they'll say it benefited those communities because, hey, they got some renewable energy infrastructure. Or in some places, it might not even be within that community per se, but it might be, say, on a city structure that might be in a wealthier, wider part of town. But they might justify it by saying that it's a structure where people from everywhere come. So it's benefiting, that environmental justice community. So from that conference, those groups are really looking at what is that scorecard that community members could use to really hold federal agencies and the persons implementing in the states and in cities accountable for that.
Oh, that's fascinating. Thank you. I was just in a conversation yesterday with an urban planner who works on the communities in Texas that were formed. They're called the Texas Colonies Project, of formerly enslaved people who were freed, who formed these small communities all around Texas. There were 36, I think, up in the Middle East in that state alone. And they deliberately chose to live on land nobody wanted. So in floodplains, in marshes, et cetera, thinking that that would mean they could build their towns and they would be safe in all sorts of ways. And now developers and infrastructure projects are going straight for those same places. And it just seems like a very concrete example of, if the developers were held accountable, or the infrastructure groups were held accountable to that kind of a justice initiative, those communities, the remnants of those communities, might have a hope of surviving. So fascinating. Yeah, really interesting. And going back to where we kind of started on that question about how your work is understood by your own colleagues. Rashad, I remember when I talked to your group that in some ways you were in a especially unique position in the group. I mean, each person was for different reasons, but in this respect, because what computer science understands to be, the focus of work seemed very distant. I wonder, how, if you would say a little more about that, and if you are making inroads there.
Yeah, I think computer science is probably quite similar to engineering. So the experience in CS is probably quite similar to what Dave described he's facing in engineering. I think there is still some lack of understanding about the fact that computer science, it has its own theoretical foundations and everything, but it is largely it is becoming an increasingly applied field at this point, and we need to be using it to try and understand problems, not necessarily solve all of them, because I don't think computer science can solve all of them, but at least to try and understand it. And I think it's a challenging thing to navigate, right? Especially. So Therese, I think the context you bringing up over here is sort of institutional incentives, right, or evaluation metrics, right? So I would love, for example, to help out a lot more on the rest of the group's papers which are bound for journalism venues, right, or communication venues. Unfortunately, it's not going to be evaluated with the same value as, you know, top tier computer science publication would. And so I don't think, while I think there's a lot of institutions that speak of the value of interdisciplinarity, I don't think it has actually trickled down into any meaningful way when it comes to metrics or evaluation criteria. And I don't think Iowa is any different than most other places I've been at, right? I think universally this needs to be something that's thought of a little bit more deeply. It's one thing, for example, to provide funding, right? That's great. It's a great start. But how do you actually evaluate the success of a project, right? Given that, so I was lucky when I joined this group. They've been on for 7 years. I just joined 3 years ago. So they went through a lot of the pain, you know, with starting off an interdisciplinary group, and I got in for the good times, right? But and it's been wonderful. But despite that, it still took us over a year to get anything meaningful off the ground, right? After, at least after I joined, it took about a year for me to contribute anything meaningful to the group. And do these funding bodies take this into account? The challenges with building a new language, with, you know, starting all of these things. And I think that's one of the fundamental challenges with interdisciplinary work. It requires, you know, institutional leaders to also value it and be willing to evaluate it differently.
And this is such a, excuse me, interesting point, because I'm seeing this in the humanities also, that the funders are really shifting their priorities. They're much more interested in collaborative work. They're more interested in community-based work, in work that I love the phrase user-inspired work that I know you guys talk about, Dave. But that means that the funders are trying to lead change, and there is this lag time now between what we see being rewarded, that has been rewarded for a long time. And I mean, even the scale of time you all described to get your project started. As assistant professors, I mean, Raven and Rashad, how are you all, because you're the most vulnerable in this moment, and that in this respect to evaluation, how are you managing that? How are you convincing your peers to count this work?
You go first, Rashad.
The sad truth is, I think it's with the expectation that it won't be counted and I need to still keep doing the other stuff as well. I think that is the reality, right? So this becomes the extra thing you do for you or for your students' value, right? And you still have your core program going, you know, so still contributing to the actual foundational part of computer science as my main job. So.
I think for me, in the fields of film and media studies and African American studies, and we actually have a paper on this in our algorithms group, quantitative and applied science work is still seen as more, quote, legitimate, even in the humanities, because they, for a lot of like historical and other reasons in terms of modernism and whiteness and money. But so I'm in a different boat than Rashad, right? Like if we publish in a CS venue, it's not necessarily seen as a bad thing. The challenge I have is the sole authorship piece. So in the humanities, it is important to have quite a few sole authored, you know, a book and journal articles, etc. And I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong, more understanding in the applied sciences to have, you know, a whole bunch of collaborative names on a project. So I sort of have to always be thinking of and balancing all the work I do in this group, but also, you know, making sure what I do as an individual author is also, you know, valued or seen as valued.
So in some ways, both of you are saying you have to almost lead two careers or 1.5 careers to be able to do this collaborative work you're passionate about alongside meeting disciplinary expectations, it sounds like. What would you like to see change if you all were the deans of the universe and the provost of the universe and your universes, and you could really rethink the system of evaluation for engineering and computer science and film studies and journalism? What would be your dream evaluation system?
I can take a stab at that. And I do think that I know for engineering, there's an ASEE, American Society of Engineering Education grant out right now looking at metrics for evaluation that addresses more diversity and inclusivity issues. And one part that we thought could be improved is this idea of the community engaged and interdisciplinary type work. And how do you actually integrate and value that more? I think Rishabh mentioned that money isn't everything. At the University of South Florida, especially when I started, money was a lot. We're not an AAU institution. And so being able to bring in funding that supports graduate students they're excellent students, but they're not the students who get the NSF GRP awards in general. Many of those go to the Ivy Leagues. We're not a university that had a big endowment to support undergraduate research. So you do those projects. And so I think we're coming at different levels in our careers and at different times at the types of institutions that we are at. I think in terms of working with more, the graduate students and postdocs and assistant professors, definitely cognizant that they should be leading the articles. And I hear what Rishabh and Raven are saying, and probably we need to pay more attention in our team to the types of articles that they need. But I found in our group that it's sort of jump at an opportunity. Is there something that we could write up here, right? So to get IRB certified so that everything we do could be published. And I think that's an approach that you take in everything. So I do think the entire process is meaningful, even the formation of your team. Can there be a publication that comes out of that? Because we're all learning in this interdisciplinary space on how to do this. You may not be a lead author, it may not be in a journal that we normally go to, but we're documenting and contributing to knowledge in that space. And so I think deans need to start recognizing the importance of that. And if it comes on your review for TMP, I don't even know if you guys in Iowa still have tenure, but I see recently there's a document going forward for us in Florida to be evaluated every 3 to 5 years, sort of even post tenure. So we really need to be careful on what those metrics look like. For us as a university trying to be AAU, it's sort of like, or do we have National Academy members? It's all these metrics that sort of are not where we came from as a university committed to community engaged work. When you look at the AAU universities that are research one, plus community engaged, they are very, very few. So I think championing established ways in which universities could adopt to these ways to work with communities and do more interdisciplinary is something that we need to strive for within our own institutions. At that conference that I told you I went to with the Bullard Center and the Deep South Environmental Justice Center, they had a panel on Gulf water justice featuring community-led initiatives for community water problems. And their evaluation was something new to me. It was called the ripple effect mapping and storytelling, where people interviewed each other about their experiences and projects. And I thought that was really valuable. I would, for us, I would love the evaluation from community to become more important. For all of our proposals, especially to NSF, we talk about broader impact, that it does this, this, this. Well, can the people who we say we're doing this for comment on, did we do this? I know Carnegie Mellon University has a metric that they're working on to look at how their work addresses sustainable development goals, not just internationally, but also locally. So again, that sort of says, is the work that you're doing really having an impact on people? And do people think you're having an impact on them? And I think we need to get to that at some point in time, because at the end of the day, most of these projects are funded by taxpayers. And I think it's just, we're in a space right now where access to what we're doing and how we're doing it is sort of at your fingertips, and people are learning to organize to sort of demand that we do better for them.
Thank you.
Just to jump in, Maya, I really appreciate that. You know, Teresa, I was at a session, an Overman session a while back, and I can't remember exactly the name of it, but the person was thinking about evaluating these cases in terms of impact, which is a term that Maya was using a lot. And impact can be thought of in a variety of different ways: impact on communities, impact on policy, impact on the field. And I think if you know, we could combine some level of impact, but also like innovation or ingenuity. I mean, I think, you know, for like, you know, at least Raven and I, probably the easiest way for tenure and promotion is to put my head down and not work with anyone and just do the things that I feel like I want to do. But I don't think, I mean, I wouldn't feel gratified with that. And I also don't think my impact would be very great, but I could probably quantify, right? I could have higher numbers. And so I do think that there's value of like encouraging people to take these risks and say, yeah, I'm trying this thing and I'm going to work with some people that I don't know if it's going to work out, and maybe it doesn't work out. And so we lose maybe some of the impact of that, but there's at least some risk taking and trying to be innovative and thinking outside the box. And it would be great if that effort was rewarded, not just the outcomes.
Yeah. Mina Kandelwal, a wonderful colleague here at Iowa, in chat notes that there's also a hierarchy of disciplinary value. And so it seems that humanists and social sciences might even gain prestige for publishing in a science venue, but scientists probably don't get that prestige from publishing in what, you know, she says in quotes, is a soft disciplinary value, like a humanities journal. And so that, you know, there's multiple authorship and joint authorship, but there's also, if you are committed to interdisciplinary work, you have to be more open in terms of the journals you'll value, the venues of publication and the forms of publication. I think that's yet another dream to add to our list. One of the groups that we at the Overman Center brought in a couple of years ago that I'm just so taken with is called Humetrics, Human Metrics for Humanities and Social Sciences. It's led by Chris Long, who is a dean and philosopher at Michigan State University. But it's a big project involving lots of people. And they have a great website. But one of their arguments is that we've gotten so caught up in the tradition, teaching, research, and service, that we've forgotten that those are merely the vehicles that take us to our institutional values and goal, you know, the mission of discovery, innovation, and education. And so the Humetrics group is also very interested in impact, but they're also interested in institutional value setting. And, you know, the project of saying, what do we care about? What do we want to be in this moment, especially historically at my college or university, and then what are the kinds of work that get us there? And so they end up pointing out, for example, that people who choose to be a PI on a grant, who ironically might not be doing nearly as much of the work for the grant, because that person is the one writing the grants, doing a lot of the follow-up, doing the grants administration, that work is yet another of those invisible forms of labor without which collaborative interdisciplinary research would not be possible. So, you know, it sounds like all of us are sort of talking about invisible labor as opposed to final outcomes. And that impact can capture that broader scale, I think, you know, more effectively.
If I could just,
oh yeah, Raven.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, if I could just quickly add to your question about what would we, or how can we imagine ways that the institutions can support us more? I think about this idea of proactive like investment in interdisciplinary groups. I think a lot of frustrations of humanities or humanists, or just me maybe, is like institutions rely on us when big events happen. So when 2020 and George Floyd's going on, or Asian American departments become important, when the pandemic and reports of numbers against hate, right, against Asian Americans are rising. And so if we could have ways to sort of value this kind of work before the height of a lot of these traumas, because these traumas are real and they happen long before 2020, right? I think that that would be important in terms of respect and value of all our disciplines.
And one of the things that's so striking about the way you've all been describing your projects, that at least seems somewhat new to me, in hearing about research collaborations in the sciences, is how much you all have talked about building attention to equity and justice into technological solutions and into process. Is that something you see happening in your fields more generally? And is that taken account of, for all that our universities talk about DEI work? Are you seeing a real move towards serious evaluation of inclusiveness and equity as part of your research process, acknowledged and again, rewarded and evaluated and rewarded? And if not, what would that look like?
NSF has an RFP out that they started, I think, last year. They're looking for centers for engineering equity. And as I said, we follow the money, but that is also informed by a need from the community. So the engineering community obviously is telling the NSF that we need better metrics for evaluation and promoting equity in the work that faculty are doing. And so I think that is a guide to say that work needs to be done, but some places are making progress towards this. But here's some funding to sort of bring out best practices that others can use. So I forgot the question specifically to Teresa, but just saying that I think people are looking for ways to get this done. I know I would imagine it at all institutions right now, especially over the past 2 years. We've been going to workshops, reading, working with each other, looking at how justice, equity, diversity, inclusivity presents itself in our work. And so I think we're all addressing it for our departments, our professional societies, having those smaller conversations with colleagues who we work with much more. And the institutional things may not be in place. There are larger climate surveys that they hire. It's a group called HEGS, I think. They have a climate survey that's supposed to look at some of these issues, but there may be some shortcomings in those, especially at institutions where people are like, well, we want to do more of this, or we want to have more of this, and maybe we could develop one in-house. So I think you'll see a lot more of these come out, which help us to evaluate our DEI activities and initiatives much more.
I'd also like to add to what Maya said. I think in computer science, there is a recognition of the importance of DEI. And in fact, the NSF, I think, sort of did something fantastic that forces people to think about it, right? So they require this document called the Broadening Participation in Computer Science Plan. So you have to submit a BPC plan every time you you apply for a certain type of grant, right? And I think there's always going to be a tension where you have some people who think it's pointless, and there's a lot of people who welcome it. And I think we're still in that battle, but I think it's a fantastic first step, and it's forcing everyone to think about these issues.
You know, I wonder, Dave, if you would just, we're getting close to the end of our time, but I wonder if you would say a bit about your graduate program, because of course, when a group of people decide they want to infuse research and the process of team building with serious consideration of equity issues, if everybody at the table is still white people, or 90% of them, what they can learn from each other is going to be limited. I mean, it will be, they can read, they can study, but if we don't have voices at the table of community members, of diverse colleagues and students, that it's going to be very difficult to move forward. So there's sort of that chicken and egg issue. But I was so struck, Dave, when you and I have talked about your graduate program and how changing pedagogy ended up attracting a different kind of student to your program, or a much more diverse group of students into the program. And so, you know, it's not just that we have to have these goals and move toward them, we have to change. And I just wonder if you'd say a little bit about the grad program and how the pedagogy is unusual and interesting, and why you think that matters in terms of the students you've attracted.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot in the literature, particularly around STEM and graduate education, that you can broaden participation by developing programs that sort of lean into social justice and public goods. And so environmental engineering is a discipline that, you know, we've lost our way a little bit in my mind. I mean, we were created out of needs, real tangible needs from society, and we still have a very important role there to play, particularly as some communities have been left behind intentionally. And so I think it's finding ways to broaden the content we're getting in front of our graduate students, but also then trying to empower them with research projects where they feel like they can still do meaningful research, but also be working towards that social good. And that's what we tried to build with our NSF funded program. And we did get, you know, we showed that you can sort of broaden participation, and we got a very diverse group of graduate students that came for our cohorts. We've learned that, you know, the real challenge at a place like Iowa is the retention of those students and making them feel like they have the support that they need here. And I can say that unfortunately we've learned that, you know, in many ways that we don't. And so, you know, I think there are ways we can build and reinvigorate graduate education in STEM fields to get more voices to the table, to actually prepare our students to do this type of work. The thing I worry about is, again, this conflict of those that want to go into academia, get to be a junior faculty somewhere, and then don't have that work valued. And I know there's some of those tensions playing out in real time for people who have come through these types of groups and gone into academia. I'll also say that, you know, we have changed that graduate program and institutionalized it at the university in an interdisciplinary graduate program that's now housed in the grad college that's built around the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which I think is a fantastic framework to get people from all disciplines together, because there's not just issues that are clean water and sanitation, there's gender equity and poverty. And so it started small with some humble beginnings here. We have our first class coming in the fall, but we really are pushing the boundaries of who can we get in the same classroom together on a few shared curriculum, and then leverage some of the really great expertise we have on some of these issues across campus to get them a clustering of courses so that they can leave with a degree that makes them feel like they can go and do something that is more empowering. And I'll just say that, you know, that's a master's program. You know, they didn't want, you know, we didn't know what a PhD in that would look like, but we do think it would be a master's because it is different type of work. It's community-based, it's project-based, it's not the same products, right? So anyways, that's the evolution of that. I think there's an opportunity to use those types of programs where you don't lose sight of the value and the public good, that we can really kind of solve a lot of our grand challenges in higher education all in one, while giving people meaningful educational experiences.
That seems like a really great place to wind up. And I know that some of you have commitments you need to jump to from here. So I just want to wind up by thanking you all so much. We've been recording the session so that we can share it with others. I've learned so much today, and I want to live in the kind of world your research groups are creating. So thank you for that too.